Hi there, I'm Scott, and this is GreatScott Knitting, a podcast, episode 6. Welcome to everyone. If you're new to this podcast and this channel, thank you for tuning in and checking out what's going on here. For those of you who are returning, I am so appreciative of your continued support of this journey of sharing my knitting and ideas with you here in this online forum. Today in Wichita, it was 80 degrees and absolutely beautiful. Actually, it's been that way for about a week of 80-degree weather, low humidity, beautiful clear skies. So lovely that over the past week, about a week ago, my husband decided that it was time to repaint the house. So today we finished up that project, and so really for the past week I've been up and down the ladder painting and doing all that kind of cleanup that is required when you go into one of these major home projects. It's been I've actually really enjoyed it. It's given me time to remember my past. My dad used to be a handyman, did a lot of home projects for other people, like plumbing, electrical, roofing, house painting, all those types of things. And during the summers, I would join him and help him out with the different jobs that he had. So this was very nostalgic for me in being able to do this work, and as I was doing it, remembering my dad and the times we had and the things that I learned from him over the summers when I was a kid. So it was very productive, and it was really enjoyable. I was also able to get, over the past couple of weeks, get a lot of knitting done in the evenings, especially after spending time on a ladder most of the day. So let me share with you some of the things that I have been able to accomplish over the past couple of weeks in my knitting world. The first thing I want to share with you is the Heartland Lace Shawl by Evelyn Clark. I've knit this shawl a couple of times. This time I used, make sure I'm showing the right side. This time I used the Knit Crate Vitalana Lofty DK, which was their December 2019 Knit Crate yarn. This is a 48% merino, 32% organic cotton, 20% baby alpaca yarn in DK weight, and the colorway is Firewood. So just a really lovely shawl. I'll admit, while I was knitting it, I was very concerned with how it was knitting up, because the nature of this particular yarn was somewhat different than what I'm used to with some of the things that I've knit before. It seemed very the lace seemed very closed as I was knitting it, and I'm used to some aspect of closed until you block it and the lace opens up. But this one was much more so than I was used to, and so I was very concerned about whether it would actually turn out in the final product. Once I blocked it, it turned out perfectly. It's absolutely gorgeous. I am so pleased with this shawl. You really can't see it as well. I'll try and insert some pictures here so you can really get a sense of the loveliness of this piece. I don't often knit with yarn that is animal fiber blended with plant fiber. A lot of that has to do with a Jewish kosher law, and yet kosher does span more than just food in the Jewish world. But there is a law about having blended material made from a blended fiber, and it's prohibited by Jewish law. So for me, as a Reform Jew, Reform Jews tend to look at laws that are not based on morality, like thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not lie and steal, those types of thou shalt nots, as being a bit more important than some of the things like thou shalt not eat pork or thou shalt not eat shrimp. I don't do those things. When it comes to blended fibers, the way I adhere to this particular law is I don't use fibers, and I try not to buy fibers that are a blend of protein-based fiber like wool, alpaca, silk, that is then blended with cellulose-based fibers like cotton and linen and bamboo. So I keep those two things separate. Now, fibers that are blended with synthetics like nylon or polyamide or even polyester, I see those synthetic fibers as not falling into either animal or plant. Therefore, those types of blends I don't have an issue with. It's just when you put the protein fiber and the animal and the plant fiber, animal fiber and plant fiber in the same yarn, those I tend to avoid. I didn't this time, mainly because I just didn't pay attention that this was a blended fiber in this fashion. So, but for this one time, I'm okay with it. The shawl is absolutely lovely. The drape is really quite nice. The feel of it is soft and supple. I'm really pleased with how this project turned out. I highly recommend this shawl. It's really rather simple in its construction. There's really only two basic knit patterns going on, two basic lace patterns going on, and they are relatively easy to memorize. So really loved this, working on this piece. I love this shawl. I love her patterns. I've done a couple of them. So yeah, that's one of the things that I was able to do. The other shawl that I got done this week was one that I had had just cast on relatively pretty much had just cast on a couple weeks ago, and that is Dotted Rays by Stephen West. This I've knit this one exactly, I think I've knit this one 3 times. I really love the Dotted Rays, mainly because it can show off so many different types of yarn in different ways. And one of the things I like to do is these color block skeins of yarn, or these color block cakes of yarn, like Karen cakes or Lion Brand's mandala, where you have these blocks of color. I think this particular pattern lends to those types of yarn really nicely, those types of colorways, because it does this lovely swooping nature to those blocks of color. This pattern excuse me, this pattern is written for a fingering weight yarn. I tend to love to break those types of rules, and this is a worsted weight yarn. The Caron cakes are 80% acrylic, 20% wool. This colorway is called Blueberry Muffin. It's this, these lovely blues, and the size of the cake doesn't quite take you all the way through the small size of the pattern, so I had to end it early. But because it is worsted weight yarn, you still get a full size shawl out of even less than what the pattern calls a small shawl. I really love doing that. I feel like I'm being sort of rebellious by thwarting the conventions of the weight of yarn and sizes and all that types of things. So I love that pattern. It's really simple. It's easy to knit. You don't have to really think about it too much, and it turns out really quite lovely. So again, those Dotted Rays by Stephen West. The yarn was Caron Cakes, and the colorway was Blueberry Muffin. All right. Works in progress. I only have one thing on the needles right now, and basically it is right now being called Variation on a Theme. It is another shawl that I am, in a sense, designing. Basically, it's the shawl that I just finished designing, which that shawl that I just finished and actually published this week is a triangular shawl, top down from the center out. And this one is a triangular shawl as well. However, it is corner to corner. It is knit on the bias, and so a little bit different. In the same stitch pattern, only being applied differently. So you can see that same stitch pattern that I had in my other shawl being played out on this shawl, but it's starting on on one corner and being knit edged across like this on the bias. The yarn that I'm using also happens to be a Caron Cake worsted weight yarn. This color is called Cake Pop is the name of this, and it basically is these grays with this pop of aqua or teal blue here in the middle, and then it has basically some white, and then it goes back into the grays again. So I'm basically playing around with that particular shawl and those stitch patterns to see if I want to take that forward and write up a pattern and publish that or not. I'm still playing around with what I'm thinking around on that. Because I just mentioned it, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit here and talk about the pattern that I designed that I just published this week, and it is the Quaker Ridge Eyelet Shawl. And here is my prototype, my finished prototype. The nature of this shawl is the stitch pattern is called is based on the Quaker ridging stitch pattern, which is in the Barbara Walker A Treasury of Knitting patterns, and it is basically a few rows of stockinette with a ridge of reverse stockinette in the middle, a few more rows of stockinette, and then reverse stockinette at the end of it. And then what I have done is I have added an eyelet band at the end of the Quaker ridging pattern, and then another band of reverse stockinette, and then starting over. In addition to that, I am playing a little bit with color in that I'm using 2 different skeins of yarn, 100 grams of 2 100-gram skeins of worsted weight yarn in contrasting or complementary colors. And then, so I start off with one color block, then I go to stripes, so 2 rows each, or 2 rows in each color throughout the pattern, which gives you that eyelet band in that contrasting color, and then another block of color, and then stripes again. This time, however, the stripes are inverted from what they were the last time, and then another block, and then ending up with a couple of rows of eyelet bands in the striped pattern, and then finishing it off with a picot bind off to give it a little extra flair at the end. So that is the Quaker Ridge eyelet shawl, and very simple, very quick, a very quick knit. I'm not a particularly fast knitter, and was able to finish this one up in like 4 days, but it was the only thing I was focused on for those 4 days in terms of my knitting. So a couple hours a day, I was able to crank this out in less than a week. So it's a very quick knit because it's worsted weight yarn. You get a nice size shawl. I used size 10 US 10 needles, which are 6 millimeter. So it gives it a really openness and a lot of good drape. This prototype was knit with acrylic yarn, so I'm planning on for my casting on this next couple of weeks is to cast on that shawl in these 2 skeins of yarn. My primary skein will be this, and my contrasting skein is this one. These are the Knitology worsted weight yarn. The color weight is Empire, or the colorway is Empire, and this one is Royal Court. And I've talked about these yarns a couple of times. They are 100% merino. 100% superwash merino wool. So that is, this next couple of weeks, I will be casting that on, and with those yarns, and working that project through just to see, because I had those 2 skeins of yarn. I've been wanting to do something with them that used both of those skeins together. They were the January knit crate this past year. I did not care for the particular project that came with that knit crate for those yarns, so I designed my own. So that's where I'm going with that. So that's what I'm going to be casting on. Acquisitions. Do not have any purchases that I've made, but again, my neighbor came through for me this past couple of weeks and brought me a couple of skeins of yarn that she just happened to be going through like a Walmart or someplace. I can't remember where she was, and picked up a couple of skeins of yarn because she thought of me. Again, not necessarily the type of yarn that I would pick out for myself, but lovely thought, and I will probably make some really a couple of great things with these. They are both Lion brand hometown hometown yarn. This is a super bulky yarn. This first one is the colorway Salem Creek. And the second skein is the colorway of Key Largo Tweed. And it does have this sort of tweedy look to it with these little pops of color that have been twisted into this aqua. Very Key Largo-ish color. So they're both super bulky weights yarn, and I'll probably knit up a couple of hats with these. So those were the two acquisitions. So the Salem Creek is 100% acrylic, and the hometown or the Key Largo Tweed is 94% acrylic and 6% rayon. So I think these little pops of color that are blended into the yarn are little rayon chunks that make up that 6%. So those are my acquisitions. I do have some things on the way. Just, of course, with COVID-19, mail services and delivery services are a little slower than usual. So next time, I'm pretty sure that I'll have some new yarn that I'll be able to share with you. Over this past couple of weeks, I was able to pull out my dye pots and dye pans and do some dyeing. And so I want to share with you the results of my dyeing projects and my dyeing experiments. For those of you who might be new to this channel, I also do dyeing experiment podcasts of my dyeing, my yarn dyeing experiments and work. So you can check those out as well. Those are my GreatScott Knitting Dyes yarn. My most recent episode was about dyeing these two skeins that I'm showing you now. So this is the first one I want to feature, and it is this deep crimsony red and black with a little band of sort of gold in the middle. And one of the things that happened on this particular yarn is there was some breaking of the black color into some of its component colors, which you can tell were some greens and blues that came out of that black that bled into my golden color. So there's this. Oh, by the way, this is food coloring that I used to dye these skeins of yarn. So this is that first one. The inspiration that I had for this particular skein of yarn was I went into wanting to dye some yarn, but didn't really have a plan and didn't know what colors I wanted to use. So my husband suggested to use the colors from his favorite roller coaster, and he is a huge, huge roller coaster fan. His favorite roller coaster was the Orient Express at Worlds of Fun in Kansas City. It's no longer around, which is really sad because it was a great roller coaster. But the color scheme of that roller coaster was red track, and a big aspect of its logo was black, and I chose to add a little bit of that gold, that yellowish gold color in the middle, which was not my husband's favorite concept, and didn't really care for it, but I thought, what the hell? When I first was reviewing this yarn, or this colorway, I wasn't that excited about it. But I don't know, it's kind of grown on me. I have an idea of, I think I might use this skein and the other skein that I dyed to do the sock head. Is that what it's called? Yeah, the sock head hat or the sock head cowl with that skein and also this skein of yarn. This skein of yarn I also dyed at the same time, a little bit differently. This one I started out, again, not with a major plan, but wanted to do sort of a blue-black color. The camera really washes this out. It's a much deeper color than you see on camera. So I'll try and give you some pictures that are a little more true to what the color is. But basically what I did was I dip dyed one end into a blue-black dye that I created again with food color, and just let it sit halfway, the skein halfway in, and then after most of the dye had absorbed, I then dip dyed the rest of it in to get the lighter blues that were left over. So again, it's really a lovely skein of yarn. Again, I wasn't crazy about it when I first saw it, but it's kind of grown on me a little bit as I've had it around me and have some ideas for it. Again, I'm thinking of doing either the sockhead hat or the sockhead cowl with this skein of yarn. So I think, because I don't believe these two skeins go well together, so I'll probably do a couple, either those hats, or I don't know. There's 400 yards of these fingering weight. Oh, yes, the bases are, and I didn't even think to mention this, the bases of these yarns, of this yarn, is 80% superwash merino wool, 20% nylon from Dyer Supplier. So this is their 80-20 fingering weight yarn. Lovely to work with. It takes up dye really nicely. I'll use it again. Be glad to do it. But next time I'm going to have a plan before I go in and start dyeing, and I think I'll feel a lot better about the results when I'm done. So that was the dyeing that I did this past week. Oh, I talked about publishing my design, and I didn't tell you where. I have published my design for the Quaker Ridge shawl. This lovely piece. It is published on Ravelry, so be sure to go check that out. I'll put a link in the show notes for that pattern, so go check it out. And if you're really interested in it, make the purchase and download it and cast on, because I want to see what other people do with it as well. Let's see, streaming, other things that I've been up to, streaming media, still watching Rebels. I'm down to the last season, which I think, for me, I really thought it was the most dynamic season that they had for this particular series. It's both poignant, sad, exciting. So I both disliked the season and loved the season when I first saw it. but I enjoyed it so much that again I'm watching it all the way through to the end. It's again kind of a bittersweet season because some things happen during this season that I don't know make it bitter. So, but then there's a lot of that aspect that sort of flows through Star Wars where you're excited about particular characters, and then those particular characters unfortunately leave the storyline, at least for a time. No one's ever truly gone in the Star Wars world, it appears, or it often seems. So, I don't know. I just haven't been watching a lot of TV or even a lot of streaming shows right now. Of course, one of these past weeks, I have been doing house painting. So in the evenings, I do a little bit of knitting and then go to bed. And really the week before that, I didn't do a lot of watching either. So let's with the house painting done, hopefully some things are going to slow down, and I'll be able to maybe stream a little bit more shows and get some more knitting, and hopefully get a little bit more dyeing done. I'm wanting to do some more yarn dyeing and have some more ideas about what I want to play with before the summer is out. But not gonna give away everything at this point, so you'll have to tune in to find out where I go with my dyeing episodes in the future. So we have reached the point where this is the point where I usually start talking about what the latest Torah portion is. So a couple of weeks ago I said you come for the knitting and you stay for the Devar. Devar Torah means a word of Torah or an interpretation of the Torah portion. So I'm going to again go into what the Devar Torah is for this past week and for this coming week. So I'm going to give you a what we often call the double portion. It is not it doesn't happen to be a double portion week, but I am going to cover basically go over two Torah portions that pretty much go together. The Torah portion for this past Shabbat was Va'et Hanan, and the upcoming Torah portion, or the Torah portion for this week, is Akev. And here's the basics of what happens in this portion of the Torah. We have left the previous book of Torah and have moved into a new book of Torah. We have moved into what in the Christian Bible is called Deuteronomy, and we call it Devarim. Va'et Hanan is the second Torah portion of Devarim. And in this Torah portion, it starts off with Moses pleading with God to let him into the promised land. If you remember a few weeks back, I talked about how Moses basically disobeyed God, and God punished him by saying, "You will not enter into the promised land. That's not something that I'm going to allow you to do. You will die in the wilderness with the generations before that were basically punished also for disobeying God, or for basically not trusting God, and they were punished with 40 years in the wilderness, and so that generation would have to die out before the people of Israel would be able to go to the promised land. And Moses disobeys God and is also punished in that fashion. And so this Torah portion opens up with Moses saying, God, please let me go into the promised land. And God's like, no means no. I'm not letting you in. So Moses, nearing the end of his life, Devarim is really, the book of Devarim, Deuteronomy, is really very much about Moses is at the end of his life, and he's reminding the Jewish people, here are the things that I have taught you to sustain you as you go into the promised land and move forward as a people. And so I want to remind you of all the things that I've taught you. So very much Moses is in this Torah portion, he is reminding the people they are the chosen people, that God chose them and they chose God as the director of their life, of their peoplehood. This Torah portion also has the second iteration of the Aseret Hadibrot. That is the 10 Commandments, the 10 sayings, or the 10 words. So they are known as the 10 Commandments in general word, and in the general sense of what people remember. But in the Jewish world, they are also called the Aseret Hadibrot, or the 10 sayings. So the 10 Commandments are iterated twice, once in Exodus or Shemot, when the law is given at Mount Sinai, and in Devarim, Moses reminds the Jewish people that God gave the law to the Jewish people and reiterates these 10 Commandments. Now, one thing to think of in terms of these 10 Commandments is that they are, well, especially for the Jewish people, they are not the only commandments. There are actually 613 commandments, of which the 10 Commandments are 10, but they are also, in a sense, also categories. And really, you can sort of consider the 10 Commandments in two ways. They list out, on one hand, the relationship that the Jewish people should have with God. It starts off saying, thou shalt not have any other God before me. So the relationship that the Jewish people have with God, and then the relationship that Jewish people should have with each other. Honor your father and mother. Don't covet your neighbor's wife or house or belongings. Don't steal, don't lie, those types of things. So there's sort of this dual purpose of the 10 Commandments. Our relationship with God and our relationship with each other. So that is reiterated in this Torah portion. And then another big thing that's listed, or that is an aspect of this Torah portion, is basically what I guess what one would call the Jewish creed. Like in the Christian world, you have various credos that you sometimes will say, like the Apostles' Creed, which a lot of different denominations will use these statements of who we are as a people, what we believe in as a people. This Torah portion has this core statement of Jewishness in this Torah portion. This is a credo, or a statement that is said at every prayer service that the Jewish people hold. We say this in the morning and we say this in the evening. It is called the Shema and the Ve'ahavta. Basically, those are the two first words of these two sections of this credo. The Shema is Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Hear, O people, or hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. That is the core piece of our belief in a singular God. It's our commitment to this concept of monotheism. And then following that Shema, usually in most prayer services, that the following the Shema is followed by a rabbinic phrase that follows it, which is Baruch Shem Kavod Malkuto Leolam Va'ed. Blessed is the name of his glorious kingdom forever and ever. And that is a rabbinic addition that is usually said under your breath after the statement of the Shema. That is followed by what is called the Ve'ahavta, which is the first word of the phrase. And that means you shall love. And so it is Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'kol levavcha u'b'kol nafshecha u'b'kol meodecha. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your might. Echoes that concept at the beginning of the Ten Commandments. You shall have no other gods before me. Again, it's a restatement of our belief in this singular God, and that this belief is so strong that we have it with all of our heart and all of our soul and all of our strength, or all of our might. V'hayu hadvarim ha'ela asher anochi mitzavcha hayom al levavecha. And these words that I command you today shall be written on your heart. In that these things that Moses is reminding the Jewish people of are so important that we should take them to heart. These teachings, the Torah, should be in our hearts. They're so ingrained in us that we live, that our heart beats through them. V'shinantam livanecha, and you shall teach them diligently to your children. This is a huge theme throughout Torah. We even have a huge holiday which is all about teaching our children our history. At Pesach, the whole Pesach meal is simply a retelling and a reliving of the Jewish history, of the Jewish enslavement in Egypt and our redemption through that came through being led out of Egypt. And then the whole concept of that Pesach meal that we celebrate year after year is to retell that story, to teach our children every year that who we are and what we stand for. So v'dibarta bam b'shivtecha b'veitecha uvlektecha v'derech, and you shall speak of them while you sit in your house. It is very common for Jewish families to spend Shabbat discussing the Torah portion for that week, or especially at holidays, at Pesach, we retell the stories, we discuss, we debate the stories of Torah. We just debate the teachings of the rabbis throughout history. This is very common among Jewish people. And so that is where that really comes from. It comes from Torah. We are commanded to debate and to talk about Torah. Uvshok baka uvkumeka, and when you lie down and when you get up. That's when, this is a continuation of, and you shall speak of them while you sit in your house and while you walk on the way, when you lie down and when you get up. The practice of saying the Shema twice a day, in the morning, or in the evening and in the morning, when you lie down and when you get up, that's where this comes from. Ukshartam leot al yadecha v'chayu letotafot beinenecha. You shall bind them as a sign upon your hand, and they shall be for frontlets between your eyes. This is the practice of or especially Orthodox Jews have, of wearing tefillin, which are leather straps that you wrap around your arm, and boxes that hold phrases from Torah in them, and you wear them while you say your morning prayers. So that's where that practice comes from, is, again, in this statement of who we are as a people, our creed. Uchtav tam al mezuzot beiteka uvisharecha, and you shall write them upon the doorposts of your house and upon your gates. The practice of Jewish homes of having what is called a mezuzah on the doorposts, or the door jambs of the entrances to the house, and the doorways of all the major rooms of your house, excluding bathrooms. So your bedroom, your kitchen, your office, all of those will have on the doorpost a mezuzah. That practice, again, comes from this statement of who the Jewish people are. All of that is in this Torah portion. The subsequent Torah portion, a Kev, is all about Moses reminding the Jewish people that if you follow the laws and the precepts that God have laid out, or that I have laid out for you from God, good things will happen to us as a Jewish people. If we don't do these things, we will not be rewarded by God. In fact, bad things will likely happen to us. And this whole concept of do good things, God will reward you. Do bad things, God will punish you. So that's what those two Torah portions were about. Is Moses is preparing the people for the time when he will no longer be their leader. So faced with this certainty that he would not be there for the people as they entered the promised land, Moses was setting out to remind the people of who they are, what they stand for, where they've been in the trials and the tribulations that they've been through, and then how to succeed as they move forward without him as their leader. Now, most of this Torah portion is directed to the people at large, to the people of Israel, but not to individuals. So when he talks about when he talks about do things, follow the teachings that I have laid out for you, and you will be rewarded. He's talking about that from a collective standpoint, that to collectively maintain the laws, follow those 10 commandments, follow those rules of engagement with God, and follow the rules of engagement with each other, good things will happen to our society as Jewish people. Don't follow these things, bad things are going to happen to our society as Jewish people. And so that's what Moses was trying to prepare them for. So really, when you really look at most of Torah is often directed at the people of the people collectively, not as much people individually. So the same is kind of true of our society today. Um, well, hang on, let me step back. So Moses was trying to tell the Jewish people, if you collectively adhere to the law, to Torah, to these teachings, then society will move forward in a positive way. So the same thing can be said of us today in our society. We have the laws that our society have come up with. For example, our speed limits, stopping at stop signs. These are laws that we have come together, and they only work if we all buy into them, if we all adhere to them. So, we could have people, and believe me, in Wichita we have these people, that when a stop light turns red, don't stop. They just blow through it. But the majority of us do stop. Now, why do we do that? Because it makes it safer for us collectively as we travel through the city, as we travel through our country. We adhere to laws because it benefits all of us to do so. Good things happen. Bad things do not happen when we buy into the law and order that we have around and that we have created. Same thing can be said of wearing masks when we go out during this time of the COVID-19 pandemic. It only works if we all buy into it and we all do it. If we don't all do it, then the virus continues to spread. Now, in these Torah portions, God has said you will be punished if you do not comply collectively with my law, and you will be rewarded if you collectively do comply with the law, the Jewish teachings. When we look at our own society, we can see this play out. We will have peaceful, productive societies when we follow those laws, the ethics, the ideals that we have collectively agreed upon. I mean, look at what has happened because not everyone has bought into the idea of wearing a mask. We have continued to spread the virus. It works best if we all wear the mask. What would be the benefit? Well, we'll more quickly move forward to a more normal time if we all adhere to social distancing and wearing masks. What's the punishment if we don't adhere to it? Well, we'll continue to have sickness and death. I mean, it's just basic. That plainly is basic. What will happen? Most of the Torah's teachings are around how we relate either to God or to each other. And this Torah portion sort of, in a nutshell, encompasses all of those teachings of Torah. And one of the things that I love about this particular Torah portion is it has that statement of Jewish faith, the Shema and the Ve'ahavta. Those are the things that Jewish people identify with as basically the creed of who we are as a faith and as a people. In the United States, we have something similar, or at least in my mind, I think it's similar. We have a couple of credos as U.S. citizens. One is the Pledge of Allegiance. Some of us aren't as crazy about the Pledge of Allegiance because of some of its wording. But there's one statement that I think truly does identify who we are as a people, as citizens of the United States, and what we stand for. And that is the preamble to the Constitution. That preamble states, "We, the people of the United States of America, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America." Now, a few of you out there, I know, probably sang that in your head, because some of us actually grew up with Schoolhouse Rock and learning the preamble by watching Saturday morning cartoons. Part of me actually wishes that we would take that preamble tune and turn it into our national anthem. Number one, it'd be a heck of a lot easier to sing. And number two, I think it actually says who we are as a people and what we stand for. And I think it honors the best of who we are as a people. I think right now, what we often see, at least portrayed either in the media or even when we're walking around and going out to the grocery stores or the hardware store today, and we see people that don't wear the mask because they feel like their personal rights are being violated by being forced to comply with mask wearing and social distancing. I often wonder, when did we as a nation become a group of people that are more interested in individualism and individual rights versus collectivism and what is good for us as a people? And I think that the more that we consider ourselves collectively as a group and what is best for all of us, we'll move forward in a better way than where we are right now, where we're saying, personal rights before collective rights. That's just kind of my take on it. So that's that Torah portion in a nutshell. We are a society of people. We're not just individuals. And what I do has an impact on you, and what you do has an impact on me. And I think we need to remember that as we move forward as a nation. And I think we're going to need to remember that if we hope to remain a nation that honors one another, that reaches that more perfect union. Thank you for watching this podcast. I forgot what I was even doing here today. So thank you for watching this podcast. Thank you for staying with me on this journey. Click like if you enjoyed this particular episode. Subscribe if you're interested in watching more of what I do on this channel. I have social media links out there. On Facebook, I do have a Facebook page for GreatScott Knitting, which is at facebook.com/GreatScottKnitting. I'm on Instagram as GreatScott Knitting, and on Ravelry as GreatScott KCMO. Feel free to comment if you have any questions or just want to give me a shout out, and I will love getting your comments and seeing what you think. So thank you for watching, and have a great time knitting.